Yeah. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management. I'm your host, Bill, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Danny. Danny, how are you today? How you doing, champ?
I'm doing good. I can't remember anytime we've started this episode or any other episode without just laughing at one another. Something that either just happened or is happening, and I have no clue what's happening right now. I
So,
totally should
Dave,
have brought the wig though. I totally should have brought the wig and brought Daniel to the show. But
yeah,
no, this
I
is
should
great.
probably tell everyone that Danny is actually down in MMS Miami this week, but he's still willing to join us for our Halloween episode of Unpacking Endpoint Management, where our topic is going to be spooky endpoint dreams. What are your worst nightmares, and what keeps you up at night? And we've got with us as always our adult supervision, Rochelle Blanchard. How are you, Rochelle?
I'm feeling witchy today.
So, Rochelle, do you have those that I've been asking about for the past week?
Well, did you get the memo?
Yeah, no, I don't think I got the memo. But
Nightmare.
We also have with us two additional guests coming from MMS Miami, along with Danny. Danny brought some friends to see. We have.
Triplets. We're dressed up as triplets. Larry, Curly, and Mike.
I was going to ask what you were supposed to be. We've got Harjeet Dalawal and Joe Laurie. Joe, how are you?
I'm fantastic. It's about 90 degrees out, so I'm a little warm. I'll be honest with you there.
Yeah, Joe, you got a little bit of fade on your face there, champ. May have to ask you to move the camera at some point, but that's okay. That's all right. So,
How's
what
that?
we want to talk about today is, what are your worst nightmares? Have they come true? What are some of your biggest critical situations that you've dealt with? What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about? We figured because it's the Halloween season, in fact, today is Halloween, that we'd actually talk about that and, of course, have a little bit of fun dressing up, right? Yeah. So we'll turn it over to Rochelle to see if we have any questions from the audience.
We do. We're going to start off with Nathan. Thank you, Nathan, for submitting. This is a long one, so give me a breath. Hold on. So my greatest Intune fear is a bad driver from Windows Update. We buy clean autopilot enrolled Windows PCs and allow Windows Update to manage drivers. After the release of driver update policies, we implemented 2 rings: automatic approval after a 0-day deferral for our Canary PCs, automatic approval after a 30-day deferral for the rest of our PCs. The problem is how to determine if it is a driver causing the problem in time to hit the pause button. The logs collected by Intune are sparse and obtuse. Ooh, I like that word. The driver IDs in Windows Update.log do not match the Microsoft Update catalog. And then what do you do if you miss the window to pause the rollout? There is no rollback. The driver will have been saved to the driver store and will survive a wipe like a zombie. Scary. Who wants to touch this one?
The first thing I want to touch is the word obtuse, because I can't see the word obtuse without thinking of Shawshank. Why are you being so obtuse?
I love that movie.
Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
I assume this is a hypothetical situation, like an actual nightmare. And so, obviously, if a bad driver has been pushed down, it's going to have some kind of drastic, visible negative effect, like a blue screen, for example, or a green screen, or whatever color it is this week, or a critical device is not working, like a camera or a microphone. So, we would hope that it would be noticed quickly in case there was a problem, number one. Number two, we would hope that if it was a known device that, the Windows Update team, this is one of those scenarios where KIR, or known issue rollback, would definitely come in handy and help kind of undo the damage that's done. What do you guys think? Am I kind of right thinking that it wouldn't be too drastic?
Go ahead, Joe. You came off mute first.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the question about rolling back to the original driver, where I like to think of rolling forward to the original driver instead of rolling back and causing potential other issues with the device. Once you install that new driver, it's not just the driver that's changed. There's lots of other things that happen. And so if you were to roll back, how do we know everything's being undone? But rolling forward, if you have a package of the original driver, might be a better option than rolling back. That's just to cover the rolling back part of it. How do we know that it's the driver that caused an issue? There's coincidences, I suppose. All of a sudden, we did start having a blue screen after we installed the driver. I can assume it's the driver, but logs. You have to check the logs. They may be obtuse. You need to check the logs though, so that that you can be 100% certain. Again, rolling forward to a different driver may also let you see that if that was indeed the issue.
And the one thing to point out is if the driver or firmware is coming from the Windows Update servicing ecosystem, there's a lot of test passes that the software has to actually go through prior to being rolled out, as opposed to additional drivers coming from additional sources. So there's that.
Yeah, I think you got a few strings to pull, especially if it comes from Microsoft. Right? If it comes from Microsoft, you got some support options there. It's definitely a scary situation because it can grow legs. As Joe mentioned, right, maybe the right perspective is to roll forward instead of backwards. Rolling backwards, I get a lot of questions about rollback, especially now working on EAM, the Enterprise App Management solution, and rollback comes up quite a bit. The only challenge with rollback is what else am I breaking? Because I'm rolling back for a specific thing, but there's a bigger picture of, in my case with apps user profiles, when you think of operating systems, what else was impacted by that driver install that you won't know until you go, as I tell people, into the bowels of Windows where you have to pull up perfmon, go get sys internal tools to start digging. And at that point, you're probably just way too far. At that point, it probably deserves a bare metal reboot or something like that, rather than continuously troubleshooting a device. I know a lot of companies have policies in place where if they mess with a device more than 15, 20, 30 minutes, it may be easier to just wipe. So there's got to be some type of line that you should put in the sand where your efforts in troubleshooting aren't worth the value you'll get from rebooting, re-imaging, etc. of that device. Yeah, the driver could survive a certain wipe, but there's different types of wipes you can do that it won't really survive. So I don't know, play your troubleshooting cards and value in that part. Harjit, you got something to put?
Yeah, so another thing to think about is this: is it how many devices it affecting, right? Is it an isolated situation, or is it more globally? I've seen in my past experience, that could be a driver could be affected by other components as well, maybe an application or maybe some hard wired things to your system, right? I've seen some of those so it may not necessarily be driver as a whole, but there may be other things related to that it's causing that problem, right?
So we have an honest and anonymous question that I think is a fun one. Why do software companies create the possibilities for the user to potentially be disruptive? Why do we do this to our customers?
Well, there's two things in that question, I do believe. First, there is the scenario that the previous question talked about, where you have a large and complex operating system, and there's lots of variables there. And when you have a scenario like the Windows operating system, which has a real kind of tiny microkernel, and then all these different modules that load into the kernel space, sometimes one little module can cause enough problems. But that's of course unintentional, and we try to avoid that as much as possible. But the other scenario is what I would call a skull and crossbone feature. So let me tell you where I'm going here. The old Bugs Bunny cartoons where they're chasing each other, or the Roadrunner is being chased by Wile E. Coyote or whatnot. And there's a scenario where you might be in a hot tub, and the hot tub or they might stick them into some kind of room, and there's a temperature gauge, and there's green, yellow, red, and then there's a skull and crossbones that they turn it to. And I always, even as a child, I always asked, why is that even possible? Why did they design it that way? And so, sometimes we've had that in the past in some of our products. I'll just go ahead and say config manager, the capability of, at one point, I think it was SCCM 2007, we could advertise a bare metal installation to the all systems collection. And at some point, it was just a one button thing, and you could actually blow away your entire estate. And I believe the config manager team at some point was like, maybe we should put some additional guardrails up here, and maybe make it easier or make it harder to shoot ourselves in the foot, so to speak. What are your thoughts, guys?
My first thought is, how many of us here have actually deployed to the all systems collection and blew away a whole bunch of stuff, or put a policy app onto a server that was very unintended? If either you're raising your hand because it happened, or you're not because you don't want to admit that it happened, but anyone that was managing configuration manager did that at least once.
So I will characterize a real nightmare scenario with anonymous people. So there was a day where I was called to help a customer where so this is actually kind of what you're talking about, Steve, where we had put guardrails in for SCCM. There was a customer that deployed an operating system to all systems collection, and I actually booted, re-imaged a whole hospital. So pretty interesting scenario. It's like nightmare scenario, right? We're talking about nightmare scenario. It was a nightmare scenario for the person going through it that I went to help. Then it turned out being a nightmare for me, because the whole 3 weeks I was there, I don't think this guy stopped crying. The whole 3 weeks he was crying. But
yeah, we had an internal KB article when I worked in support around 2008, 2009. It was mostly about resume writing tips and search sites. Yeah.
It happens, man. It happens. And I didn't have the pleasure. I did not have the pleasure of working at Microsoft. Somebody told me not to take that job.
And did that include re-imaging the config manager server too?
Oh, everything was gone. Everything from servers to workstations. I spent 3 weeks helping that organization do DR. It was just it's kind of sympathy. You feel sympathy and empathy for the person, because it's one of those career limiting decisions. But I tell, one of the things I was told when I became a leader in my organization, when I was a customer, is you have to allow people to make mistakes so they can learn. Your job as a manager is to make sure they don't make the big mistake. And I'm pretty sure everybody's got a story like that, especially being in IT. I mean, we all probably have a story like that, doing or helping customers through those scenarios, or just friends and family through those scenarios. So it's a nightmare scenario. It happens.
Let's continue with this theme. I like these stories. So what was the biggest nightmare of a support case you've ever worked on? Harjit or Joe, do you have any stories that you can share? Anonymously, of course.
I'm glad to say that I was not in support. I joined Microsoft in consulting services. So I have a lot of nightmare customers that if they're watching this, they'll know who they are. So I actually can't share any of those stories. But I was talking to a customer today. We have at MMS, we have these like cabana sessions. You can see I'm in one now. And one of the other Microsoft people with me was telling a story of his customer that wanted to push a desktop image package down to all of their client machines. And so they did that through a script, and the script was going to select all files in the C, Windows, whatever directory. They were going to create a desktop images folder and then copy in images. And every month they would send a script that would do a star delete in that directory and then a copy in or paste in. But they did it to the all systems collection. I actually had this conversation this morning, so it's funny that this comes up. They did it to the all systems collection, so all the servers that didn't have a desktop images folder went up a level to delete all files, and that was at the C Windows directory. So it was C Windows star delete all files. And so that was a story he told us an hour ago, maybe. So yeah, I mean, that's something, this is real, like this happens. Y'all hear that airplane above us? Can you see Danny, by the way? You see Danny behind me? He's like over there somewhere.
So for me, my experience was we were trying to move from one antivirus solution to the Microsoft one, right? Because Microsoft started incorporating Windows, what was it, Defender and stuff like that. And in order to do that, we were trying to set up SCCM, right? And it was 2007. And okay, great, we're going to do our testing and whatever, and small. And next thing you know, we pushed out the config manager agent to everyone, and we weren't ready yet. We were like supposed to wait for another few weeks to do that. And then we walked up to the boss. Hey, boss, that testing we were doing, we're now production.
Solve two problems with one action. That's kind of what I just heard.
See?
Probably my worst nightmare court case is right along the line with what Joe, or what that apparition that I thought was Joe, was saying earlier.
I think I'm good now. The sun, I think it's kind of moved a little bit.
That's I was supporting a product we called Virtual Machine Manager, and it's still around, but it was in its earlier days. And we had a customer that had 3 gigantic clusters and was running everything on Virtual Machine Manager. And because I was supporting Virtual Machine Manager, I got the call. But the root cause of the problem was there were, between these 3 gigantic clusters, there was this entire operation on about 100 VMs. And one critical VM had gone down and was not recoverable. And it just so happened to be the only VM that was a domain controller, including for the host. So because the host couldn't find the domain controller, it created this house of cards. So literally the entire operation was down. And I got the call on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. So you can imagine how I spent my Thanksgiving holidays on that long running. We call them crit sits at Microsoft. But that was probably the biggest nightmare case I ever worked, because the problem actually wound up being a flaw in WMI on that bad VM of all things. But it took hours and hours and following the sun and handoffs and
I would have thought Y2K was the biggest issue that you had to deal with, Bill. No?
No, not Y2K. What's Y2K? Have we hit the year 2000? Are you sure my company has planned everything around the impending Y2K? We'll be ready, willing, and able.
And maybe printer management over there too. I know Mike has a problem with that. So
ready,
let's take a look at it.
I don't know about the able piece, but maybe ready and willing.
So let's pivot this a little bit. Instead of looking externally to our customers. Bye, Bill. What was one of your rookie mistakes Have any of you ever been nearly or actually fired from an IT job?
I would say not a rookie mistake, but the networking team wasn't prepared for the size of the packages I was traversing over their WAN links. So one of the MCS jobs that I had, that's Microsoft Consulting Services, now known as ISD. I don't know what that stands for. So one of my MCS customers it was a global company, and they wanted to, this was back in Configuration Manager 2007, I think. They wanted to put Office in the image and every language pack in Office in the image. So the image itself was 14 or 15 gigs in size. And we sent it out to all the distribution points before the network team told us to. And so it tied up all the WAN links globally to all the smaller countries that had bad internet service. So didn't almost get fired for that. I did get my hand slapped for that. My boss was notified about that. But again, that was a networking thing, not a all collections, wipe out all devices thing.
I can honestly say that I have never been fired categorically from an IT pro full-time salaried position.
That was very specific.
That being said,
that was a lot of classification in there.
I did have a problem years ago when we were trying to join two sites, and we had just put in at the time, fiber was new and fiber was expensive. And when I joined the two offices, I had misconfigured the switches and the router. And long story short, I configured something called the frame type incorrectly, and these were all netware servers and netware environments and network clients. And long story short, everybody was taken off the network. And so in a massive panic to try to remediate that, I went to pull out one of the fiber connections, and I pulled it out so hard that I broke off the end of it. And of course, it just kind of catapulted from there. And I was contract and very early in my career, and I was kind of told to hit the road. So that was bad times. I was definitely a rookie and definitely making rookie mistakes. But I just got my certified Novell engineer, so I thought I knew everything, but I had only really studied a book and passed the book test. So I had lacked practical experience, and it showed.
Yep.
Harjit, you've got like 20 years in education, right? You must have done some interesting, scary things.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind is I used to manage a bunch of print servers, hundreds and hundreds of printers of different makes and models, and wasn't really a rookie mistake, but it was more like trying to solve a problem or whatever with a particular type of a printer. So when it updated the driver, again, now back to drivers. But what I didn't realize is that when you have a print server and you have, I don't know, a printer model ABC, whatever it is, and if you got multiples of those, right, it actually updates the driver on not just that one that you were trying to do, but everything, all of them. So, but unfortunately, that particular driver was not the right one, so it kind of hosed all the printers. So we had to like scramble real quick and, undo, go find the right one, put it back in, and then so.
I think I have another one from here. Very spooky. We have customers even here at MMS that want to do autopilot with hybrid Azure AD join. Ooh, that's that is scary stuff.
That's scary.
I actually had a really bad nightmare last night that config manager was dying. Is that true? Please tell me it's not.
I assure you that. Yeah, I assure you.
That's not even worth the energy in the conversation. It's not done.
SMS is not dying. SMS is going to be around forever.
Well, case in point here, at least three of us are here at MMS Miami, and there are lots of config manager specific sessions. So it's still going.
And we had our internal training last week where we had the config manager devs come on and present to all the internal Microsoft folks that wanted to join. And I had a customer come to my Cabana session this morning and said, just be honest with me. I don't have an NDA, but be honest with me. What's the future of Active Directory and SCCM? What's the future there? And I was honest with him. The future is we are still developing SCCM, and we have a big team of developers, and we still have a current branch that's being rolled out annually. Active Directory is not going anywhere. We don't publish how many devices are connected to AD, but it's enough that Active Directory is not going anywhere.
I have a session today on config manager specifically, especially the different tools within config manager. So, hey, if we're doing it,
all that said, we do want you to start moving to the cloud, and Autopilot is the perfect place to do that. Do the hybrid Azure AD join, now known as hybrid Entra ID join devices for all of your existing devices. But once you assign that Autopilot profile, and once you start going to an Autopilot reset or a brand new device, make that Entra ID joined, Azure AD joined. All existing devices, sure, but all new devices or repurposed devices, bring them into Entra ID joins.
So I went to try to sneak a look at my phone, and that's how you know your costume is good, because it won't unlock my face.
It won't unlock your face.
He'll lock out his phone for the next 5 minutes.
We actually have a Rudy, who's a good friend of all of ours, has a story. He's not on this call, or he's not in MMS, but he has a story to share of a small oopsie some time ago when we needed to do reporting about which users were local admin at a medium-sized company. But somehow we switched the detection script with the remediation part. We deployed admin lists within a couple of minutes. It sounds positive, but Windows somehow didn't feel like it was a positive thing, or his team didn't think it was a positive thing. But they went purely windowless in a couple of minutes all over the company. Again, good idea, but test, roll it out. I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead. I may have cut you off.
So going with Bill here, do you have your own version of TPS reports you have to do at Microsoft?
Yeah, we do, depending on your job. Every job at Microsoft has a tool that it can be tedious and monotonous, because we're always having to track and measure. Like, I used to be in support, and in support we had our metric tool called MSSolve. And when I was in, Joe can talk about ChangePoint and our MCS time tracking software, that we were constantly being pressured for operational excellence. And of course, in product engineering, we have so many tools and reports that we have to do to keep track. So yeah, it's funny because, I've watched people who have been, really, really, diehard Microsoft fans and MVPs over the years. And then they come to work for Microsoft, and they have to discover that Microsoft is still a company just like everybody else. And we still have them. Harjeet, remember you came to Microsoft recently, and I'm sure it was interesting and surreal when you're like, wow, this is like a regular job.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, it is.
So Danny, speaking of modern management, what are some nightmares that you see customers running into when we're talking about modern management? You're muted.
All right, so now I can tell. So, the thing for me is I won't say resistance, but the slow adoption of cloud. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of customers. So I keep hearing customers like with old stuff and just still knee jerking to, this is the way I did it 10 years ago, and I'm going to keep doing it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And there was a time, like, I hear these stories from customers and hear them articulating stuff, and it's like, I remember thinking like that when I was on the other side. It's don't broke, don't fix it, don't create more work, don't create more risk where I don't need it. I remember being like kind of intermediate in my career development. I hear these stories and it just makes me reflect and cringe because I once thought like that, but the scary thing is that they continue to think like that. And what's not being seen is the situation that you're really putting yourself in. I totally get the perspective of it's not broke, don't fix it. I get the perspective of I don't want to take on the risk to go through the change. But you hear customers that tell me, hey, we still have ConfigNano 7, or we have ConfigNano 2012, or I've got for like Microsoft Exchange. Like, okay, I get the resistance to change. I do get it. Change is hard, and measuring the risk is what I think makes people not want to change, because it's not just a risk on technology and process. It's a risk financially. It's not really a gamble, but it's not a small task to try to accept change and understand that risk. But hearing all of these customers talk to me, the one thing I'm starting to realize, or really just cement, because it's something I've known, it's just your risk. You're actually making your risk a lot more dangerous. A good example would be, I talked to a customer that was in a scenario, and not just today, but I've heard this today and from a few weeks ago from another customer. They are still on SCCM 2012 R2 because they're trying to get to the cloud, but they can't use the stepping stones to get to the cloud because they're on the old version of 2012 R2. The upgrade process is so difficult to get to current branch. The intermediary hops, every time they go through an upgrade, they have to go through change. Change equates to risk. So think about this. If they continue to not do anything, and hey, it's not broke, don't fix it. Great. What they're really backing themselves into is into a situation that's scary, funny, but also nightmarish, because think about it. They're going to, if they don't do something, or customers don't do something within the next, let's say, year or two, you're going to be so far behind and have to go through so many upgrades to get current. The level of risk is going to be astronomical, to where you will actually have to decide, do I want to go through a disaster recovery scenario to get current, or do I want to take the small amount of risk through the change to get through it? In real scenarios, like, it, I don't know, it's like, I get on one hand you hear it as a customer as a salesy thing, but I think you need to process that as and look beyond that as being a salesy thing. Microsoft a business, we have to make products, we have to sell products just like any other company, your company is included. But you have to find a way to get from point A to point B, and not have, you have to find a way to get from point A to point B while it takes you 5 minutes. The longer you take getting from point A to point B is going to now take you 6 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and all that time, the as the road gets longer, your risk that you're not seeing is getting more and more dangerous. Because I have talked to customers, at least in the past month, to where we have had the difficult conversation of, hey man, I just might as well wait till this thing blows up. You probably should at that point, because who wants to go through the small changes and have to deal with the consistent risk that's going to be introduced with each change over 8 months, when I can take a weekend, go through a hard down cut, and just move and accept that risk for a smaller period of time. It really puts customers in a very, very challenging state the longer they wait. I talked to customers today that are still not co-managed. It really worries me, because 3-4 years ago I talked about co-management. I talked about the big three. I talked about things you should be doing, and customers still haven't done it. And I don't know. It's really starting to make me pivot. And I consistently tell my leadership, like, at some point, where do we draw the line, and how do we continue to help customers? Because if they're going to stay behind, there's going to have to be whole different sets of efforts to help customers move. So anyway, I'm getting on a soapbox, but like, really, that's the scary thing for me, is the customers that continue to take a long time to move. They have to do something. Doing nothing is never an option, and that's the nightmare for me. As I hear customers, like, it's just something you see coming, and you can't avoid it.
The one thing that I
Anyway,
picked up
so
from
far.
everything that you were saying is that you've discovered customers until today are still not co-managed yet, which is really interesting. And we've been preaching and we've been pushing that for several years, as you said, right? And I thought we've already saturated that space. Like, hey, co-management. Now let's do Intune, let's do cloud, whatever, right? But to see these customers that are still, not there yet, is pretty scary, I would say.
I thought like even my session this morning was like, hey, we had a how do you get started session this morning, and I
Mhm.
haven't done a how you get started session in at least 3 to 4 years. So it's amazing not just to see who shows up. It's amazing to understand even after you present, hey, how many people come up to you and say, hey, we dabbled in it, we tested, we're not there yet.
Yeah,
We're like, how many devices you got? I got 10. How many total devices? 80,000. Whoa, hey man, where's the
yeah,
fast track here? We need to get moving. Well, we heard, and to Joe's point, like we heard Config Man's dying. That's what we like. Who's telling you this stuff? Who's making
exactly.
this stuff?
Well, in Harjit, when we're talking about like a lot of our what we call our strategic 2,500 enterprise commercial customers, yeah, we've saturated a lot of that. But then there's education, there's schools, universities, there's state and local governments, there's small and medium sized companies, and
Hmm.
it was.
Yeah,
I kind of went through the same shock a couple of years ago talking with a lot of customers when I realized that they're we still have customers who claim they've gone to a cloud journey, but all they've really done is they've moved Office to the cloud, and that's it.
yeah.
And so, moving them along additionally has been kind of a big challenge. Yeah, Danny, you're spot on. And one thing I've noticed in the information protection DLP arena is we have customers who are afraid to do things because they're afraid of disruption, they're afraid of breaking things. And when it comes to things like, putting labels on stuff and encryption on stuff, you run the risk of accidentally, locking users out and accidentally blocking information. But these are the same customers who also tell me what's keeping them up at night. And when you and I'll always, when I meet a customer for the first time, at the end of the meeting, I like to say, what's keeping you up at night? What's got you scared? You know what the most common answers are? Number one, enterprise level ransomware attack. Number two, massive data leak or data exfiltration. And at the end of the day, anything that would get them in the press or get them fined, that's what's
Hmm.
keeping them up at night. And a lot of that is not necessarily around production being lost, but security. Security is a big thing that's keeping endpoint managers up at night as well, in terms of how are they going to deal with that? Because at the end of the day, if you're at a visible organization and you've been breached, everybody in the IT space there is going to kind of get that stank on them, for lack of a better word. So, yeah.
I
But
mean,
I
to
think
that
part of that
point, it's
equation,
also just go ahead, Harjit.
I think part of that equation is also level of skills.
Mhm.
I think when you have IT pros that have been doing things the same way for many many years now, you got these new things. They are kind of scary. They do need to reskill up and stuff like that. So the hesitation is like, yeah, like I'm not gonna break what's not fix what's not broken, kind of a thing. And we don't have the budgets or the manpower and stuff like that uh, to dedicate to learning and skilling and stuff. But
Hey, but
anyways.
isn't that an opportunity? And maybe I thought
Hmm.
maybe I'm different, right? Look, like when I was young in my IT career, man, I wanted to do so much stuff like
Everything,
my
right?
manager would do. Like, oh
Yeah,
crap, he's managing Exchange. I want to go play with that. Oh crap, I was SCCM.
yeah.
So why would I won't say old man like myself, like I'm probably over that hill right now, but like, why would a young aspiring person that really wants to like climb in their IT or technology career shy away from that? Because I tell you right now, if I was younger, if my younger self, I would like totally be all over the whole graft API. I'd be grafting all kind of stuff. Like I do dabble in it now just to keep the
Hmm.
skills up. But like, dude, like you should totally be aspiring
hungry and
version. Exactly. Be hungry. Like, go get, like,
Mhm.
you cannot sit there and expect people to just hand you stuff. Like, if there's an opportunity for you to learn, man, go learn, go grow. Stop trying to wait till somebody to hand you something. I'm sorry. I'm preaching.
Yeah.
I'm off.
But that's how I was as well. When in my younger times, I was like, hey, oh wow, I want to work on this, I want to work on that, I want to, you know. But I think now what's happening is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that IT pros tend to specialize in just one particular thing or one area, and then they just stick with that kind of a thing, right? It's my domain, it's my my skill sets, and nah, I don't want to work on Exchange, or no, I don't want to work on Teams, I don't want to, that kind of a thing. But
I get it. I get it. It's
yeah,
just maybe it's a different world, man. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, we have a new one that's come in. What's keeping Vinod S 2020 up at night? He needs a script to reboot the devices via Intune as at a scheduled date and time. What's the solution?
I don't know. Right off the bat, and others jump in, but like right off the bat, if you want to schedule rebooted devices, first that's a little bit scary. I got tons of questions why, but hey, evidently you have a reason. Write a script, create a scheduled task. That's probably what I would do. May or may not be the right thing, but there's so many ways to slice that. I mean, others jump
Yeah,
in.
I'd have a lot of questions as well, but I'm thinking first is doesn't I assume Windows updates are coming down on somewhere around the second Tuesday of the month, or maybe a little bit after that, depending on their rings. Wouldn't the device reboot at that point? So are they talking about update or rebooting the device after updates and rebooting the device at some other time when it might be used? Like I would say a scheduled task, depending on how it's written, may or may not care that someone's in the middle of a task on that device and will simply reboot it. Sorry about the noise above me. So I really, Vinod, if you have some clarification in there, would love to pick that apart a little bit.
mhm.
What
But
else?
I was also going to say before, like to Harjit and Bill, to your points, a lot of our customers tell us they know that they want to modernize. They want to lift and shift all their policies from Configuration Manager into Intune. But that's not modernizing. That's simply changing your management platform. The same apps, the same devices, the same policies. You lift and shift them. They've been around since 1995 or whenever you started with Configuration Manager. It's time to, I don't want to say start from scratch because that's near impossible for most companies that are larger companies. But you do want to, instead of moving all of your group policies into CSPs and all of your app packages from Configuration Manager, which may be in the thousands, into Intune, you really want to enable co-management maybe and start moving your workloads. And don't forget, and I will preach this like Danny was preaching before. I was trying to find a sun and a halo for my preaching, and I couldn't find one. But you know, when you lift and shift, you're not doing anything differently. You're just not. And some of your policies are 20 years old and are no longer relevant. And there was something else I was going to say, and I'll interrupt somebody when it comes back to my mind. But
You basically
uh,
just move the dishes from one
yeah,
table to the next table. Basically,
yeah, that's all you've done.
that's all you've done.
Bill, we got a question also that came in, and X wants to know in LinkedIn, and if you're not following Steve Thomas on LinkedIn, you really should be. But on LinkedIn, seems like you've gone through quite a few job changes recently, role changes. Can you tell us about that? What you're doing now, and how you got to a point where you can role change, pretty periodically?
He gets bored.
Are you asking me what I would say I do around here?
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
I
okay.
think so.
We've been wondering.
So
What?
it's
Let me reword it that way. What is it you would say you do around here?
Joe. I don't know. Actually, I um, I went through a rotational program that's uh, I was invited to apply for a rotational program at Microsoft, We internally refer to it as the Quest program. And before, I was actually in the Intune or Endpoint Management at the time, CXE team. And then, so what I did is I spent 2 years in a rotational role in technical sales. So I went to the field. I'd never been to sales before. They encouraged at Microsoft a growth mindset. So I actually spent 2 years basically as an imposter pretending to be a technical salesperson. And it gave me an opportunity to branch out into an area of Microsoft 365 I hadn't explored yet. And it was the what we now call the Microsoft Purview products. And I've spent 2 years with that. And at the end of my rotation, you go back to an engineering group or a product group. And I decided that I see a lot of opportunity in the Purview space, which is, we used to call it Microsoft 365 compliance, but it's so much more than compliance. It's data security, data protection, privacy management, legal, discovery, auditing, overall insider risk management, insider threat management. It's a great suite of products. And the tie-in, of course, with the endpoint management, of course, is endpoint data protection and endpoint data loss management as well. So just, learning new things, as we always say, and looking for opportunity. And the Canadians call it, kind of skating where the puck is going. Especially with AI, there's a lot of concerns around ensuring, data protection, governance, and ensuring that privacy guardrails are put up. There's the side of AI that's really exciting and really flashy, and then there's a side of AI where there has to be kind of management. If you're listening to the news, the White House yesterday just did an executive order on AI protection, privacy, and governance. But I digress a little bit. But the question was, what do I do around here? And that's kind of what I'll be doing around here.
Sounds good.
You can see at MMS lunch is being served, so people are starting to come out our tables.
This is so fun. It feels
That's if
like
you see a lot of movement going around.
Hey, we're doing real things, man, live.
Yep, this is really live.
What you see is what you get.
So we have one from John. I've deployed the 22H2 feature update through Intune, and I want to verify that the deployed machines have been updated. The reports blade in the Intune portal is so odd. I can't understand whether it is installing or installed, or it shows progress, but it has been more than 3 days. Anyone want to tackle this one?
So my first question, it's kind of irrelevant, but Windows 10 22H2 or Windows 11 version 22H2? That's my first question. I ask because Windows 10 version 22H2, as you know, is our last version of Windows 10. So you should be starting to think about your move to Windows 11. If it's Windows 11 22H2, thank you for moving to Windows 11. But the Windows Update for Business reports are not in the reporting blade. I think that's where I would start, using Windows Update for Business reports to report on that. They should be. I believe they're in the Azure portal, though, not in, and I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think they're in the Azure portal, not the Intune Admin Center.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, heading back to the tech community. And I apologize in advance if I butcher your name, but it looks like Mikal. Mikal's current nightmare. Is there a way to get admin notification, when a new computer is enrolled in Intune? We have hybrid joined scenarios, so it takes a while for devices to show up there. I would like to get some email notification versus Windows enrollment notifications, which seem to send notifications to the user and not me as the admin.
It's great feedback, and it's not the first time we've heard that. What I'm going to ask you to do, Mikal, again, Michael, I hope that we're pronouncing your name correctly, is, and I promise you we look at these. If you go into the notifications blade, or the enrollment notifications blade, and into an admin center, click the send feedback, the send a smile, send a frown button, and send us that feedback. That gets digest weekly, and it's sent to all the PMs that own the blades, the different nodes, different pages. That's where I would start on that. It is feedback that we hear fairly often, that it's not, we don't want just the end user to get that email. We want the manager to get the email for two reasons. One, maybe they just want the manager needs to double check that the user got his device and has enrolled it successfully. And if not, they can follow up. And two, to make sure that maybe that department, that manager's department, is actually paying a fee to IT for every device that's enrolled and to manage it. And it's all that cross check stuff. So they want to know about that. So we've had a lot of scenarios where that request has come in. I would just add to that. Just send a smiley, send a frown. In this case, I'm guessing it would be a frown. And just say that you're looking for more options on notifications, enrollment notifications.
It's a good call out, Joe.
Oh, we have too much silence, radio silence. Do we need to talk more about Halloween? So some of you know, and some of you don't know, especially if you don't know who I am. I'm actually from Salem, Massachusetts. So right now, and I'm in Miami at MMS, but right now in Salem, it is a madhouse for Halloween. There are over 1 million people come in during October from every state in the union and then some. Just to see what Halloween is like in which city, Salem, Massachusetts. I'm missing it, but Rochelle is bringing me back home by wearing her witch's hat. So thank you, Rochelle.
Yes, this is the least I could do this morning with getting my kids ready to go to school in their costumes. So I am a witch. Okay, we have another one. Giovanni's nightmare. Enrolling shared devices in Intune. We need to enroll a couple of computers as shared devices in Intune. These devices are Windows 11 computers, but we plan to add a couple of iOS devices as well in the short term. These machines still need to be managed with Intune for updates, security policies, etc. Until now, we have used an admin account to set up these machines, but this is not ideal as employees can leave the company and the machines need to be reassigned to a new primary user. The management name needs to be updated, etc. I'm considering using a dummy user as an enrollment manager to set up shared machines, but I'm wondering if there are best practices for this. In particular, is it better to use a dummy user account or a resource account? What type of license is required for this user? Intune Plan 1, even if this is a resource account? That was long.
That was long, and I understand the question. I'm going to be honest with you when I say, as much as I love Intune, and I know a lot, very broad knowledge of Intune, shared devices is not my forte. So maybe Bill knows a little bit, but I do want to say that when talking about using a dummy account, don't talk about your coworkers like that.
Yeah, now Joe, we don't need to be harsh. We've got so originally Intune was designed to be around user-centric enrollment, not necessarily device-centric enrollment, because we license according to the user. And, we're getting now into device-based management, device-based licensing, especially with the frontline worker licensing programs that we have. But generally speaking, how I've been doing it with IoT and kiosk devices, when I say IoT, I like IoT enterprise and things that I'm setting up as a device designed to be either shared, or another thing would be userless devices. I do the same thing that the user talks about. In fact, in my tenant, I still have kiosk user accounts, and that's what I actually call them, kiosk user, because there's going to be things assigned to the device, but I actually assign the user as well for specific policies, because I want to keep things locked down. I want to keep the start menu locked down, for example, especially for single app kiosk. Of course, Windows 11, there's some different things I have to do on that side, but at the end of the day, I like where the customer is going with that particular suggestion. And I know that we're continuously innovating on the Windows side. Danny would probably be able to chime in, but I think Danny had an episode with a bird on his head and had to tweet. But he might chime in.
All these people sat down at his table while he was in the middle of talking to us, so he got up.
So Danny's a very popular guy there, so It's understandable. Yeah, it's MMS, and Danny's the config man guy, so and Intune guy. So yeah.
So let's start wrapping it up. I just want to get some final thoughts from those of us who
As
haven't
we wrap it up,
managed.
can I just want to comment on the dual factor part of it. There is a TPM limitation of 10, like Windows Hello for Business as an example. You can have up to 10 different users enroll their face or their fingerprint in Windows Hello for Business. And that's a TPM limitation, not a Windows, not an Intune, not an Entra. It's a TPM limitation. So when you start thinking about those shared devices and dual factor authentication, you have to consider that when coming up with the with the factor that you're using. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Rochelle.
That's okay. I was just going to ask for a quick round robin. If you had to pick what is unequivocally the best way to reduce the risk of endpoint nightmares, what would you say?
I would say always test with a small group. Always, if your policies have audit mode capabilities to where or what if scenarios where you can actually fake rolling them out, but actually generate events that you can track to see what the effects would be. It's always good to take advantage of that. I know, Intune has some what if scenarios. Microsoft security products have a lot of audit mode options there as well. But, and of course, testing is not necessarily a one-day thing. Sometimes you might want to keep watch for 3 or 4 days just to make sure there are no adverse effects.
For me, I would say that limit and the number of admins who have the keys of the kingdom of your management, whatever you're using, right? So don't have everybody as full admins and have full access to your management capabilities, and that's one way of reducing risk.
And I'm going to go another route, and I'm going to say, and I love both of those ideas, and I'm going to go back to Nathan's original question as well to answer this, is some of the things we're doing in endpoint analytics will really help avoid these nightmares. As an example of his driver question was, how do I know what other machines have it installed? Well, one of the things we have in advanced endpoint analytics is like a machine timeline. And you can see when did it blue screen, when did something update on it. And as you click on that event, you'll see, oh, after this driver was installed, what other machines have that driver installed? What other apps are on that machine to really help you? I know that's kind of a little proactive. I'm sorry, not proactive, it's reactive to avoid the nightmare, but it does help once that nightmare has happened. Avoid the nightmare, everything that Bill and Harjit said.
Perfect.
All righty. Well, again, I'd like to thank my co-host, Danny, who is somewhere in Miami right now, and our adult supervision, Rochelle Blanchard, and our two special guests, also live from MMS Miami, Harjit Dalawal and Joe Laurie. And I invite you to next month's session, which will be kind of a November-December hybrid, where Danny and I will actually be doing an episode live from the Denver Microsoft office in front of a studio audience, the MEM Denver user group, and we look forward to seeing you there live. Anything can happen, especially in front of a studio audience. Once again, thank you for joining us for this month's Unpacking Endpoint Management. I'm Bill, really Steve Thomas. Happy Halloween.